Joining us on the show, Professor Swaran Singh from Center of International Politics, JNU, is back with us on the show. My colleague Nivriti Mohan is, of course, here with us. I want to come to you, Professor Swaran Singh. Let's talk about Russia's revising its nuclear doctrine. Are we looking at a new global nuclear deterrence coming to light vis-a-vis Russia's revision of its nuclear doctrine is concerned? What sort of impact are we looking at as far as the ongoing war in Russia and Ukraine is concerned?
Whether there was a time when Russia used to swear by what is called no first use, that they will not be the first to use nuclear weapons in any war against a nuclear weapon state, and that they will never use nuclear weapon against a non-nuclear weapon state. But from there, it has been revised several times, and every time, including this time, when it says that even if non-nuclear weapon state is doing that long-range attack into Russia, but if it is supported by a nuclear weapon state, that would trigger nuclear response from Russia. So every time such changes have led to what we call lowering the threshold of nuclear war, making nuclear weapons, sort of coming into action much earlier than they should be, ideally speaking. So yes, that has definitely increased the tension on both sides, actually, both in Ukraine and in Russia. Indeed, I just came to know that United States has closed its embassy in Kiev right now. So they're anticipating some kind of a major air attack on Kiev in the coming times. But equally interesting is that now it is also being seen as a war between United States and Russia, particularly Russians see it that way. And the fact that Russian S-400 air defense systems have been able to intercept and kill these long-range missiles coming from United States is a point where Russia sees having shown that its technology is able to withstand and deal with American technologies. People also believe that in terms of over-the-horizon targeting, in terms of navigation, it's not just the Ukraine forces which are using these American-supplied long-range missiles, but in some sense there is a coordination that United States may be providing. In that sense, the definition that Russian President Putin has been making of United States being directly seen as involved. He is recently, last month only in St. Petersburg, reiterated the same comment that in case a non-nuclear weapon state attacks Russia using long-range missiles, but is supported by a nuclear weapon state, meaning United States, Russians will see it as a war between West and NATO and Russia. So there is a huge anticipation of escalation, which is also partly just 30 more seconds, is driven by the fact that we know that from 5th of January, 7 weeks from now, Donald Trump is going to take over presidency, and he said it very clearly that he doesn't want to give any military support or help or any other help to Ukraine, and potentially there could be some kind of a ceasefire. So both sides are trying to consolidate and capture as much territories is another thing, assuming that there could be kind of a ceasefire. So, definitely tension quotient has gone up very high in last 2 days.
Absolutely. Tension quotient. I want to briefly understand what has led to the US sudden support for the use of long-range missile. Now, Biden is on his way out. We know Donald Trump has time and again said that I will take only 24 hours to find a solution to the Russia-Ukraine problem. Now, we all know 24 hours is too short for it, but at the same time, rhetorics aside, what has really led to the US support for the use of long-range missile, a decision coming in when, Joe Biden is in his last leg of administration?
Exactly, Shweta. Some of these periods of presidency are also called lame duck presidencies, and they should not be taking such decisive decisions during last few weeks of presidency, particularly which are against the sentiment of the designated president who's soon going to take over United States presidency from 5th of January. So there is also increasing criticism of President Biden within United States. For example, Michael Waltz, who President Donald Trump has nominated to be his national security advisor, has told Fox News that Biden has done this to escalate, driven by military-industrial complex, which wants the world to move into World War III so that they can earn more profits. People are also saying this is to simply undercut President Donald Trump initiating a war termination, which is what he's been saying, as you mentioned, 24 hours. Or at least before his inauguration, he also says this should end on its own, otherwise he will have to intervene more directly in that sense. So same is true of Europe. You just mentioned of Finland, you mentioned of Sweden, the panic. United States is packing up its embassy from Kiev. That means the nuclear brandishing of President Putin is already delivering results on the ground. And therefore, I assume that nuclear weapons, we often say the only use lies in non-use of these weapons now. So when it comes to sort of punishing Ukraine, Russia can do much more even without involving nuclear strike in that sense. So I think this could be perhaps more brandishing and projections, which, as you see, already are showing results, both in terms of criticism of Biden in United States, panic in Europe and in Ukraine. And therefore, this could definitely see escalation. I'm not saying there's not going to be escalation, but whether nuclear strike will be a sensible, rational requirement here, I don't think that would be a requirement at this stage, because Ukraine can be punished enormously. If you remember the initial 4 weeks of the war in 2022, the way Kyiv was bombarded, several of these eastern areas were bombarded. So long-range missiles were given to Ukraine to use on its own territory, not in Russian territory. And this decision to allow that to happen in just last 7 weeks of presidency is itself raising a lot of questions. And I therefore don't think, first of all, that this amendment to the nuclear doctrine in Russia is not the first time amendment. Similar changes have happened over years, one after another. But they do make, as we say, threshold of nuclear use much lower. Hopefully, we are not going into Third World War, because I don't think Russia would require to use nuclear weapons unless, of course, as Nivriti was saying just now, if NATO, comes in directly in terms of direct military intervention of NATO, could perhaps escalate it to a nuclear launch from Russia. Minus that, and Ukraine is not a NATO member, I don't think there's any sense of NATO walking in to protect Ukraine in terms of military intervention. So I think it's a strong nuclear brandishing as part of power projection. It is showing results on the ground. And therefore, it could definitely escalate the situation, but I am not so sure if this is going to initiate a nuclear exchange between NATO and Russia.
All right. Doesn't look like a World War III would be here and imminent, but